Hello, everyone on Facebook. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Ebony Chappelle, and I manage programs and communication for Leadership Indianapolis. And today we are coming to you on Facebook Live. This is our first time doing something like this, but we are having a special lunchtime combo with Miss Alelia Bundles. Alelia is the author of On Her Own Ground, which is the foremost account of the life of Madam C.J. Walker, who we know in this city as a great philanthropist, a history maker, and a trailblazer in many ways. I also have joining us Rebecca Hutton, who is the president and CEO of Leadership Indianapolis, Oseye Boyd, who serves as editor of the Indianapolis Recorder Newspaper, and also Tamara Winfrey Harris, who is a VP at CICF. Thank you, ladies, so much for being here.
Thank
Great
you.
to be
Thank
here.
you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, why don't we go around the room and just to get the conversation started? Alelia, I'll have you sit this one out because I think we know what your connection is to the story. But just share a little bit about the work you do for people that are joining us that maybe don't know who you are, and also share what your connection is to the story of Madam Walker, if there's one piece about her that you particularly connect with. And Rebecca, I'll go ahead and get started with you.
Thanks, Ebony. So I'm Rebecca Hutton, President and CEO of Leadership Indianapolis. We developed a pipeline of community leaders for the city of Indianapolis and the surrounding area. And I think one of the things that is really important about the work that we do is that we believe community leadership is at its best and its strongest when it is multicultural, multi-generational, and collaborative. And all three of those things being really, really important to strong community leadership. And for me, the connection to Madam Walker is, I grew up in Indianapolis. I'm an Indianapolis public school kid, K through 12. And so when I think about the kind of icons of our city, and particularly having lived very close to Indiana Avenue for a period of time, I think of Madam C.J. Walker, and particularly as a young woman, knowing the story of a woman who was successful in so many areas was really important to me.
Thank you so much for sharing. Oseye, what about you?
Well, as you said, I'm the editor of the Indianapolis Recorder, as well as Indiana Minority Business Magazine. And the Recorder is 126 years old now. So started in 1895, the fourth oldest black-owned newspaper in the country. So very proud of that legacy. The connection to Madam Walker is as a young black girl, I mean, you always hear about Madam Walker. She's like one of the first people you hear about who quote unquote made it. And then she's just a legend. Inspired by her story, want to like one day, be like Madam Walker. And of course, hair is so important to our community, especially to black women. Getting my hair pressed as a little girl, hearing the stories and hearing about her hair care products and all that stuff. So just always felt a connection to Madam Walker. I remember my daughter was in third grade and they do the Live Wax Museums. She chose Madam Walker to represent. So there's always been that connection, I think, for me.
Such great connections there, Oseye. Thank you for sharing. Tamara, what about you?
You
There
would
you
think I would have this by now. I'm getting it. I am the Vice President of Community Leadership and Effective Philanthropy at Central Indiana Community Foundation. I am also an author who focuses on Black women's stories. So my connection to Madam is twofold. One is an example of a Black woman's story. Like there is so much in Madam's story that we can learn from, both in our past and our history. And also because, part of my job is to guide philanthropists in giving that reflects their values. Madam stands as an example of Black philanthropy that so often goes overlooked because the many different ways that we give.
Thank you, Tamara. You provided a great segue to a question I want to start off with asking Alelia to answer, and that is what you feel the significance of Madam's legacy is in our current day. We've heard from Rebecca about her just being, a pillar and, having that history of the community she used to live in. Oshia learning as a little girl, and then her daughter learning as a little girl about this, magnificent woman. Tamara speaking to her philanthropy, which we are definitely going to talk about today. What do you make of all of that and her significance in our world today?
Well, first of all, thank you for doing this conversation and for the opportunity to share more about Madam Walker's story with Leadership Indianapolis, because people know the building is there in Indianapolis and they don't always know the next level of who she is. And if they saw Self-Made, they got an inspiring story from Octavia Spencer, who's great, but not a lot of historical facts that are accurate. But I think that for me, Madam Walker's story is one of empowering women. And we know the story of her being born on a plantation in Delta, Louisiana, first child in her family born free, and being a millionaire by the time she died at 51 in 1919. But for me, that millionaire piece should be like just a little asterisk, because what's most important for me is that she provided jobs for thousands of African-American women who otherwise would have been maids and laundresses and sharecroppers. She allowed them to buy homes, to create generational wealth. And then she used her wealth and her influence to organize women around political activism, to contribute to Black schools, and to be a philanthropist. And I think has left a legacy that still inspires people.
Absolutely. And I want to open it up to anybody else to jump in if you also have thoughts on that. But one of the things that really stuck out to me in reading the book, Alelia, was her philanthropy and how she did not wait. Madam didn't wait until she had boatloads of money to freely give away, to get involved. And that was something that stuck out to me that was really incredible, because a lot of times people can feel discouraged if they aren't like a Lily or, whatever, entity, that they can't be involved in that work. So I'm just interested to hear what other people have to say about that.
I mean, I feel like in that, Madam C.J. Walker is like most African-American people. I mean, studies show that is true. We definitely know that we don't have the same generational wealth as our white counterparts do, but research shows that African-Americans actually give more. And Madam is an example of that, and give in many different ways. So, we give monetarily, we give our time, we, give to the community. So there are a lot of different ways that we give, and we give more than others.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to chime in because I think we often don't realize how much we give. We just it's just kind of what we do. But we take care of people's children. If you know that a mom has to go to work and you have that auntie or that grandma who takes in all the kids and charges them little to nothing, feeds the kids. We do these things and we don't consider that philanthropy, but it is. It's come so natural to us because we've seen it done so many times, and then we just kind of pass that on. When you take that food to the family who's they lost a loved one, that's a tradition. I started because my grandmother did that, and so I make sure if I know someone who's passed, who's died, I take food to their family so they don't have to worry about it. All these things we need to recognize are a way of giving and helping each other, and I think we often think it has to be monetary. Money's good. Money's great, and we need that. We definitely need that monetary giving, but we also have that love. That's a big part of. We do so much out of love, and I think Madam Walker showed us that too. I think that's part of her legacy too. She loved her people. She loved Black women.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that, Rebecca. From the civic leadership perspective, what are the messages that you think need to be shared to let people know that no matter what level that they come into this, that they have something, that could be shared?
Yeah, it's so great. I was going to jump in right after Oshia, and so this is a part, it's like you were reading my mind. It's a good reason why you and I work together. I mean, I think that all of the comments that both Tamara and Oseye just made about philanthropy are right on, but they can also be applied in a much broader sense to civic leadership. I mean, Madam was this incredible civic leader in a variety of ways. As Lilia said, she was creating all of these jobs. She was supporting other people. Yes, there was philanthropy, right? It is in a lot of different directions. But one of the things that I often think about is, so often when we talk about civic leadership, we think it needs to look a certain way or come from a certain place. And one of the things that I appreciate about Madam's work is that throughout her life, she found ways to be a civic leader. And as Oseye said, it was very natural. I worry sometimes that we overlook really important civic leaders in our cities because we're not open to where they may be living. They may not be open to where they are working. We may not be open to how much money they may or may not have. So I just think she's a fantastic example and a good reminder that civic leadership may change and grow throughout somebody's life and their career, but we should never dismiss somebody's ability to be a leader in our community and to make meaningful contributions because of any particular situation that they may be starting out in.
Yeah, a great point. And I really like what you said about not being open to where these people, exist that could be those great civic leaders. So not tapping into their networks. Something going back to the book, Lilia, and also I think this was demonstrated in the Netflix series Self-Made. But Madam, she was very involved with her church. She was very involved with organizations that were deeply rooted in her community. But as her social status started to climb, she was mixing and mingling with all different types of people. And some of that, was very positive. Other people like Booker T. Washington, for example, that was a little contentious leading up to it for lots of reasons. You guys need to read the book to really fill yourself in on that. I would encourage you to do that. But I want to have you speak a little bit to the importance of collaborating across those different social spheres, and also what type of things Madam did to build herself up to be comfortable in those spaces.
Well, thank you for that. And I think what Rebecca was saying about meeting people where they are, somebody had to see Sarah Breedlove, the washerwoman, who happened to have a good enough voice to be in the church choir, but who didn't have the education and the polish at that point of those women who were in the church, the women in the missionary society, the women in the choir, but who they saw something in her. And they realized part of their mission as club women, as members of the National Association of Colored Women, their mission in life was to find people and to bring them along and to look for those leadership qualities. And so had it not been for those women of the Church of St. Paul African Methodist Episcopal Church, giving Sarah Breedlove a vision of herself as something other than an illiterate washerwoman, she would not have become Madam C.J. Walker. And I will also just quickly say something about the way Booker T. Washington is portrayed in Self-Made. Some of you may know Amanda Washington Locker, who lives in Indianapolis, whose husband Darrell is with the King Kennedy Memorial Park. But the portrayal of Booker T. Washington in the movie, I think, is just kind of cartoonish. And there's a much more nuanced relationship and this is part of her rise. when they first met, it was contentious. They were not in the same social circles, but she kept pushing. And ultimately, she did, have a bit of a tiff with him. But by the end of his life, there was collaboration between the two of them. They figured out a way to navigate and negotiate their relationships. And I think that is what you're asking. How did Madam Walker move through that? She observed other people. She observed how to be diplomatic. She hired a personal tutor, Alice Kelly, who became the manager of her factory, who'd been dean of girls at a Black boarding school. She wanted to know the social graces, but she also wanted to, keep that drive and that push. And so she was looking at how other people were navigating these spaces and realized that those women who were more educated, they might have had, some more airs about them, but she understood the women, the grassroots women, and she understood what they needed because she had been one of them.
Absolutely. Other thoughts on that concept, of developing social capital and being collaborative? Tamara, you're still muted.
I promise you get it by the end of the lunch discussion.
You are quite all right.
I think even among Black people, talking about Madam's relationship with other prominent Black people of the day, even among Black women, we are, everyone knows, not a monolith. We exist in intersections of class and experience, and that's really where the richness lies. So, there's the onus is not just on like the Sarah Breedloves who have to figure out how to navigate in different circles, but it is also on the people of power to make space for Sarah Breedloves and other people that don't look like everyone who is always in power. So we don't miss those voices. She was as dynamic as a washerwoman as she was as this wonderful philanthropist and entrepreneur that we know. And I think it's important, like, again, this is where Madam's story is so important. And it tells us the importance of letting in voices of people when they don't hold as much power, because they're valuable and they bring something important to the table.
I think something you said, both of you said, is key. People saw value in her regardless of her station in life, because your station is not what makes you, valuable. You being a person is what makes.
Sounds like we lost you for a little bit, Oshia. Your audio has gone out. But hop back in whenever you get a second. But yeah, it sounds like your audio just went out there for a second. Rebecca, at Leadership Indianapolis, and you said it earlier, our focus is to make sure that leadership in this city is multicultural, is multi-generational, and it's collaborative. Can you speak a little to why that is the case in relation to this topic of building social capital?
Yeah, absolutely. Because very deeply believe that any problem that is in the community, any issue that we have, affects all of us, which means it takes all of us to solve it. To think that because something is happening on the west side, the east side people aren't affected is not realistic. And so that also cuts across gender and race and generations. And so I think oftentimes, especially in Indiana, as very, as Hoosier hospitality gets woven into our DNA, we often, I think, lean too much and yearn too much for consensus rather than honest dialogue, which can really get at how do we get it at the root of issues, and how do we also fully celebrate the successes in our community. And to do that, I think, authentically and with deep meaning, it requires us to have lots of different people in the room, people of different ages, so that older folks with more experience can share their wisdom, and that younger people can step in and share their fresh version of wisdom and the things and insights that they have. It means that we need to have Black, brown, and white people, and people from all different neighborhoods and races, if we are going to have solutions that really work for everyone. If we're going to dismantle systems and not just shift who they work for, it requires all of us to be involved. And, as was said earlier, I think that the onus then is on people who have power, people who have leadership roles, to create those opportunities and those points of entries for those who have not been given those opportunities. We can't just expect people to walk into rooms and to, quote unquote, earn a spot. We have to create those opportunities for people. So,
absolutely,
like I said, multi-generational, multicultural, and collaborative. There has to be a desire to work together, not just to win arguments. And so I think it takes everybody.
Yeah. Oshia, do we have you back?
Am I back?
Yes, you are. Go
Okay.
ahead.
Sorry, my daughter called and disrupted my wireless earbud. So, what I was saying, I think not only did someone see the value in her, she paid it back by bringing others up, and we have to start understanding that it's not just the station you hold in life that makes you important. So often we kind of cater to people that we think have position and power. We want to keep catering to those people instead of looking at those who may be leaders coming up who just may not have the social graces yet. Um, may not be able to put on those airs, as you said, Alelia, because they don't know those airs yet. They don't know but they're real. They're grassroots, and to me, that's much more important. And we have so many leaders who are at the grassroots level who just are not quote unquote haven't made it yet. So we have to start looking at those people and understanding the kind of model that Madam Walker what she modeled for us, and how we actually help bring people along and bring them up and put them into positions, help them get there so that they can become leaders, because we have so many leaders in our community. We really truly do. And like you said, Rebecca, we have to have diversity of leadership too. So many times we get in positions of power and we don't want to give it up. I was just having a conversation today about older people who wouldn't give up pass the baton to the younger people. And so they ended up, there's always this tension. But if we just recognize that the younger people have that energy that you need, and the older people have that wisdom, we can do so much more together than we can apart.
So, if I can just add, something to what you're saying, this sort of generational push and pull. I grew up in Indianapolis in the 1950s and 60s. So that means I've been watching Indianapolis for a long time. And I feel fortunate to still have connections there, to know folks like Ebony and Oseye and Rebecca and Tamara and other folks. The new Black reporter at the Indianapolis Star is a student of a friend of mine he had gone to Columbia. And I was speaking with him the other day, and I was making a list of people because I think he's been kind of thrown into the middle of this, thinking he's coming to cover a community that was waiting for him to arrive. And we know, I told him he needs to meet you, Miss Boyd. But there's a lot going on. But I started making a list. I'm like, you need to know this person, this person, this person, because I think there is a generational difference of people who are my age, who have been holding on to power, who have a lot of influence, who don't necessarily understand just how smart this next generation is. And I think, if I can just observe sort of politics there, that there's often been a push and pull between what's expedient and what can be done quickly versus something that's truly visionary. And we see that with Indiana Avenue and with with it being torn down, with the highways coming through, all of the things that, all of us know. But this is a moment for vision. But the people with the most vision are younger people.
And I would just say this is another example where we need a variety of people at the table, because there are generations, older generations that have been through a lot, that have done a lot, and they have a lot of important wisdom. And I'm not ready to say, okay, go away now, right. You're done, because there are important things that younger generations are going to need to know in order to navigate the spaces that those older generations have already navigated. But if we keep telling younger generations, no, not yet, then to Alelia's point, then we miss out on that vision. So like in a perfect world, we would be able to bring both of those groups together and they can lead together.
Yeah, and going back to that idea of social capital, the other piece of this is recognizing that just because somebody is younger or because somebody doesn't have as much access to a network with power doesn't mean they're not bringing something to the table, right? I mean, we think about social capital also often in terms of, influence or in certain networks or money. But to the points that have all been made here, whether it's somebody who's younger, whether it's somebody who's much more grassroots and embedded in the neighborhood, they bring a lot to the table. It's not just a matter of bringing them along, but really fully appreciating somebody's understanding of the neighborhoods, of knowing the people in the neighborhoods, and all of that energy that comes from that. So I think it's important when we talk about social capital to recognize that there's opportunity for it to be much more mutual than we often think of it as being.
That's right.
Absolutely. I think that you all shared so much, so many good gems there that people can take and use as we continue to have these conversations. That point about wisdom from the older generations, I think for me personally, it's come in conversations that I have with people that are still living, but also reading and studying the history of those that have come before. What are some parallels that you all draw between the Indianapolis of Madam's era and where we are today, specifically with regards to civic leadership?
I'm going to have to sit this one out as a native of Gary, Indiana. So I'm going to pass this on to my Indianapolis peeps.
All right.
Well, that's not fair because I'm not from Indianapolis either. So that's not fair.
And yet the two of you know Indianapolis better than most people who are from here.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you don't have to be born here to, be able. Yeah. And
we can't let that one be an out.
Yeah.
No. I mean, I'll jump in real fast just as, obviously somebody who leads a leadership organization and is from Indianapolis. When I think, there's good and bad, right? Like there's clearly progress as a city. I think we've made a lot of progress. The fact that we're having this conversation, and I think that there is progress in terms of, the work that CICF is doing in terms of dismantling systemic racism. Some of these conversations would have been happening very differently in Madam's time. And so I'm grateful for the progress. But I also think about how unfortunate it is that we're still dealing with some of the same challenges. And with as much time has passed, it feels like perhaps we should have solved some of the issues that she was grappling with, and that we could be a little further along in that. So, there are things to celebrate, but certainly also some disappointments that we as a city could be a little further along. We could have learned more lessons more quickly from Madam C.J. Walker.
Right. There are people who are in leadership positions who are making a huge difference, but there really is no longer a thriving Black business district. And there needs to be a big infusion of an improvement in that, and investment in businesses and entrepreneurship and collaborations, whether it's between the philanthropic community, the private sector, the university, the business school at IU. I mean, there are just so many ways that there can be collaboration. But certainly when Madam Walker was there, she was not meeting with the leadership of the business community. And I just think it's really important. CICF is doing really important work to make people aware. And I know there's pushback on the work that you're trying to do. And I will just, one example for me, when I was, I graduated from North Central in 1970, so a really long time ago. But at that point, it was before the highway was built, that was being planned. But now people can go straight from the far south side, the far west side, the far east side, the far north side, and go straight to downtown and bypass what used to be a very thriving Black neighborhood, middle class, working class neighborhood. But many people who have moved to Indianapolis or who have grown up in the suburbs have no idea the history of the city. So it is really important, I think, to create that context. People drive on 65. They don't know that there's MLK, which used to be Northwestern. They don't know the history of the city and the people who have helped to create the city. So it's really important to educate people about the history of Indianapolis, both along racial lines and economics, and why the city is as divided as it is in those ways. And at the same time, there are lots of really great collaborations that are going on right now. So it is knowing both pieces of that story.
Excellent points. Go ahead, Oseye.
As someone who's not from here, it took my best friend to kind of give me the history and the rundown of, like you said, like 65. I had no idea. You know, I had no idea that it tore through a Black community the way it did until my friend was telling me about, oh, that street was actually Northwest. And I'm like, oh, really? You know, so it takes that kind of people, that connection. But I would say right now we're kind of in this resurgence. I would say, well, there's always been entrepreneurs in our city. But I would say there's kind of been this resurgence here in the last year or so, probably a couple of years, of just more and more Black-owned businesses, more people collaborating together to create Black-owned businesses, more connecting the dots so that we know where to shop, where to go, you know, because there's always been this kind of like, oh, I want to go support, but I don't know where that business is. Now we're seeing those kind of networks being created where you can easily find that network on Facebook, on the World Wide Web, wherever, word of mouth. And then you have the Indie Black Chamber. You know, we have these things now kind of coming to create and create connections so that the businesses they are able to get resources. Part of the problem is they're not able to connect. We don't have a lot of capital. You know, we know that when we start a business, we don't have much capital. So now they're able to start connecting them to the resources to help them get the capital to kind of help just go from this one person entrepreneur to actually a business. You know, and I think we're seeing that more and more. And then, of course, CICF plays a huge role in that. So that's kind of the parallel I see with Madam Walker's. We're getting back to that kind of connecting and creating businesses, creating jobs, helping our community help itself. We're kind of getting back to that.
I wonder if one of the things that we can take from Indianapolis's history, which actually is true of the history of many places, is how important Black business corridors, Black entrepreneurism, thriving Black areas are to the health of the broader community, and also the Black community. So we can look back on Indiana Avenue in Indianapolis, but also like Bronzeville in Chicago and Broadway in Gary, Indiana, and see how those were like hubs for the Black community that helped nurture and helped it thrive and help. And so we need that again. So much of that has been taken away from highway construction and politics and redlining and all of those things. And we all lose when that's not allowed to stand. And that's an Indianapolis issue, but it's much broader than Indianapolis because you can see it across the state and across the country.
Yeah, and Tamara, I mean, your point, I also have been sitting here thinking about Indiana Avenue a lot, right? And what I mean, I would give anything to go back and to see it in its heyday and to hear the music and to just feel that vibe and that energy. And now it's mostly parking lots, right? Like, which was intentionally done. And so I also think it's important for us to remember that going forward, because there's also a lot of energy around Indiana Avenue and right now, and thinking about what it can be going forward. And we have to make sure that when those Black business corridors that you're talking about, and when those spaces and those in our community are created, that we hold them sacred, right? That when we need a new parking lot, we don't just go for the cheapest land, which is the cheapest land because of redlining and all the things that you just said, which is generally going to be in a predominantly Black neighborhood. So I think part of it is also as we start rebuilding those spaces and thinking about that we also really hold ourselves to a high standard of making sure that we don't let that kind of mistreatment of those spaces happen again.
You know, I think there's a great deal of interest and energy, as everyone is saying, in what's going to happen with that 700 block, how it connects towards downtown, how it connects towards towards 16 Tech. There are people in city leadership, in politics, in philanthropy, in grassroots organizations, people who really want to see something very positive happen at IU, but it really is the will of pulling that together. I was just reading it because I get my Madam Walker Google alerts every day, and I see that Cleveland is creating a Madam Walker business district. Now cannot let Cleveland have a Madam Walker business district, and we don't have.
They cannot outdo us on that. No.
Really.
But isn't that usually how it is? You don't get love from the local. from the locals, outsiders give you the love. So we can't let Cleveland outdo us with that.
Yeah, we absolutely cannot. So I hope that, folks will hear this and then think, okay, can we also do it? Because they can't have trademarked that. I don't know, maybe we'll figure it out.
Look, it's a public name, so you can't stop that. But it just sort of says to me, other people are valuing this. Some of you may know, I've been involved with a group called OG Inc., where we've been really focused on what's the future of Indiana Avenue. And we were able, Tamara was part of it, to bring together people from the city, from IU, from Lilly, from CICF, a range of community people together to talk about this. And that conversation had not been had publicly. That needs to continue. So I'm hoping that more people will continue this conversation, because these are all stakeholders in making this successful.
Absolutely. That needs to happen for sure when it comes to respecting the time that we're in, the things that can happen. And I also, what you said, Oseye, about we need to, represent our own a little better. It reminded me, there is a quote in the book where Madam is talking about her time when she eventually left Indianapolis, as far as living here. She said that she found it to become too small, too confining, and too conservative. And it stung when I heard that, because I was like, I agree. But also I was like, I love Indianapolis so much. So it is like that tug of war sometimes. And there's always conversation happening about, what do we do to retain our good talent? What do we do to keep going what we have? What would you all say are those barriers for emerging leaders, and what are some assets for emerging leaders here in the city?
Well, I can start. I think the smallness is an asset and a barrier, oftentimes, because you can make those connections easily, but also you feel, like you said, the conservativeness, you feel stifled sometimes. People don't see your vision. People don't see the creativity, but it's easy to reach out to people when you're small. We often don't have the resources sometimes, but we often don't even realize we have resources there within our community. We just don't know how to access them. I think that's part of the issues that we have here. And then, as when you were talking about Indiana Avenue, and then we were talking about Bronzeville, you mentioned Bronzeville, Tamara. It made me think of the Bronzeville podcast. I don't know if you guys listen to the Bronzeville podcast, but I was thinking, wow, could we have an Indiana Avenue podcast like that? Wouldn't that be awesome because it talks about Bronzeville and Chicago, and just the history. And Lorenz Tate started after talking to Quincy Jones about this area in Chicago. And it's just an awesome podcast. But I was thinking, man, maybe we need to get that going so people know about Indiana Avenue, so people know what we have, this gem that we had, and we can recreate. It may not be the same, but if we can recreate that. I know I've kind of gone off on a different tangent, Ebony, I'm sorry. But I just had to get that part out. Because I was just thinking that would just be so awesome to tell our story. Because for people like, I'm not from here, I'm from Muncie. And when I hear people talking about Indiana Avenue, the Recorder was once there, and I hear it, it's like, I want to be in that place. That place sounded like a place I needed to be, So why can't we do something to get that back, or a semblance of that? So I'm sorry, I don't think I answered your question.
No, that's okay. That's okay. You shared some good things in regards to that. But any other thoughts on some of the barriers, but also assets that exist here to help emerging leaders?
Well, I think one of the things that brought me here in 2004 was, I came and visited, and it's, central Indiana is beautiful. There are so many strong, beautiful, neighborhoods. There's collaboration within the community that I was not used to seeing. I moved here from Chicago. So collaboration, wonderful arts and cultural offerings for a city this size. And now we have the cultural trail. Like it's a very livable city for someone who left Chicago because they were slowly being priced out of Chicago. And where so much that was awesome requires you to have a whole lot of money. Indianapolis was a huge change. And I would say one thing that we need to work on is supporting Black arts and culture, supporting Black businesses. Like there aren't, when I visit some other cities like a DC or a Baltimore or Philadelphia, and there's this rich culture and there are places you can go as a Black person where you feel included and you feel like it's your place. We don't have a lot of those that I know of in Indianapolis and Marion County, and we should. We used to. I mean, as I understand the history of the city, so I'd love to see that come back once again.
So I think what both Shea and Tamara are saying that the strength is that it is a small enough community. It's navigable. You can, there's not as much space between you here and the person who's at the top. You can have 2 degrees of separation rather than you don't have any degrees of connection at all. And that is definitely a strength. In terms of culture, I think probably the reason that I was so freaked out about some of the things that might have happened on Indiana Avenue is because I see that as the last space to try to stake a claim with the cooperation of both sides of Indiana Avenue to uplift culture, to uplift business. So, that's not the only place in the city that it can happen, but it is a kind of a symbolic stake. Tamara, also the housing in Indianapolis is affordable. And that is that's huge in a city like that, because in order to get started, and I know the housing prices are going up, but I just look at the house I live in DC, and it would be like I would have a big house in Indianapolis. And I think that's really important for folks. They can raise their families in houses. The taxes are not as big, and it's a very livable place.
Yeah, and then the other thing too, I think, is Indianapolis can sometimes feel safe. Right? Because it is a little bit more affordable housing wise, because it is a smaller community. And I think that that's good, but we also can't be afraid to take risk or to create an environment where other people can take risk, right? So that entrepreneurs can start these small businesses and they know that they're going to be embraced. Tamara mentioned the arts and culture. Gang Gang is out here doing all kinds of amazing work in the community, and that's all fairly fresh, right? Rather than it just being Gang Gang, having an entire community of artists that are able to embrace those spaces and do that work. I think about cities that have that rich culture or that rich heritage, and you don't even have to know what's going on to know that you want to be in that neighborhood, right? You go to visit and it's like, I don't have to even look to see what shows are. Like, I know there's going to be good music and I'll find it walking down the street. And I want that for Indianapolis. I want to be able to walk down Indiana Avenue and hear live music and pop into some place. And without having to have done the research, 2 days before to see who was playing and if it was going to be open. And so I think part of it is we have so much good that is happening. And it's, I think, just continuing to make more space for more of it so that it doesn't feel so like there's a person doing this or a few people doing it, but this is what a community is doing. Mm-hmm. And I'll also say, when we talk about Indiana Avenue, Emily, I think you're right. I think it is not the only space, but it is the space that has the strongest foundation to rebuild that. I think it also has to be important to white people in the city for Black communities to have space. Right. Just like we talked about social capital earlier, not just being on the people who are trying to increase it. It can't only be up to Black people to say Black spaces are important in our city. Our entire city is better when people feel like they have a space where they can belong, where they can create, where they feel included. And we should have spaces where we can all come together. But it's also really important and should be important to the white community that Black communities have Indiana Avenue.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why Indiana Avenue is parking lots and Massachusetts Avenue and Virginia Avenue and other places, a broad report, other places were developed. One thing that I do think we can't leave the conversation without addressing is just the great income inequality in Indianapolis. And that there's a big impact on who feels included. We are talking about ways that enhance the city culture and business, but there is a great income disparity in the city.
Which
I think
again,
that can't. Yeah, go ahead, Rebecca.
Sorry, I was going to say, which again, I think brings us back to Madam, right? She was making sure that people had jobs, as you said, that wouldn't have had those kind of jobs. And I just keep thinking everything that we're talking about keeps coming back to Madam, which is why we're here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that can't be overstated, Alilia, about the wage gap. We have a lot of work to do in that area. One thing that I did want to highlight before we wrap up, this past weekend, the city celebrated Juneteenth, in a bigger way than I've ever seen in my entire life. I don't know what it was before my 32 years here, but in the time I've been here, it was huge, amazing. And I think it really showcased that spirit of Indiana Avenue and having all this Black art and Black culture and collaborative experiences with one another. So I just wanted to highlight that and give a shout out to everybody. There were so many events, I'm not even going to begin to name them. But a quick search, online around what happened, I think will help expose people to stuff that happens all throughout the year, but maybe just got a little bit more shine around the holiday season. But this has been a fantastic conversation, ladies. I can't thank you all enough. As we go around and wrap up, I want to give you all an opportunity to showcase or talk about upcoming events or initiatives and how people can connect with your organizations online. I usually do this part for Leadership Indianapolis, but Rebecca, I'll have you do that for us today. I'll start with you, Alilia.
Well, I would just I thank you so much for the chance to be with all of you today. And I would just say, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Alilia Bundles, and my website, aliliabundles.com. And that's where I'm posting the things that I'm doing.
Wonderful. Tamara, I'll come to you, Oshia, and then Rebecca.
To learn more about Central Indiana Community Foundation, visit CICF.org. And you might want to look at our strategic plan for Marion County to see the ways that we're trying to affect change in some of the ways that we've talked about today. And then personally, you can find me at tamarawinfreyharris.com.
So you can always see what the Recorder's doing at indianapolisrecorder.com. We are still on the library issue. If you haven't read or haven't heard about the library, there's been accusations of racism and sexism at the Indianapolis Public Library. So we are still on top of that. We have another story in this week's edition. So we're always focusing on issues of equity and inclusion and diversity and just how to make our community better. We don't just always report about the negatives. We try to help find solutions to those issues. And we do have coming up, we have a huge package we're working on about environmental issues affecting the Black community in Indianapolis. So we often don't think about our environment and how those roles play, how environment plays a role in our health, our mental wellness, all those things. But we're going to focus on that for the first time since I've been there, just a really deep dive into the environment. So.
And Ebony, you always do this so much better than I do, so you fill in the gaps on anything that I miss. But you can find information about Leadership Indianapolis and everything we have going on at leadershipindianapolis.com. Of course, we're on social media, so we'd love for you to follow us there and to tag any nuggets that you take from these conversations so that we can also hear what people are taking away from these conversations. We are still in our Get On Board event season. So we have a couple more workshops coming up here in the next few weeks. One of which is going to be led by HR Guru, which is Kristen Lampkin. And so we are going to be talking about how it's one thing for boards. There's a lot of conversation about boards increasing diversity, but it's another thing to actually welcome those voices, make sure people feel included in the decision making so that they want to stay with those organizations. And so we're going to be talking about how you retain that kind of talent and attract that kind of talent from the organizational side. We'll also have a workshop next week on Tuesday at noon coming up, which is going to be focused on stakeholder analysis. So when we have these whole conversations, we talked about managing lots of different stakeholders and people from different spaces and schools of thought. There are some tools that we're going to be talking about how you can use to navigate that. So keep in touch with us on social media and follow the website. And we've always got something cooking.
Can I say one more thing?
Go ahead. Go right ahead.
At the Indiana Historical Society, I hope everybody who hasn't already seen the Madam Walker exhibit will go and check out the exhibit. It is up for another few months.
And it is a fantastic exhibit. I went to go see it, and there were live actors there, and it was amazing. But yes, and Rebecca, you did just fine. No worries. You did great. But thank you again to Rebecca Hutton, Leadership Indianapolis, Oseye Boyd from the Indianapolis Recorder, Tamara Winfrey Harris from CICF, and our guest of honor today, Miss Alelia Bundles, the author of On Her Own Ground. Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in. Have a great day and a positive week.